Hello, School Transportation Nation. Welcome to the podcast. It's Tony Corcoran with School Transportation News with you. This podcast is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Our friends from the Propane Education Research Council, also known as PERC, and Vera Mobility. We have special guest today, Ben Springer, nationally certified school psychologist and TSD Conference keynote speaker. Always a pleasure. Mr. Ryan Gray is with us too to break down all the headlines. But before we get to that, a message from TransFinder. Well, the votes are in and STN Expo attendees have spoken. TransFinder was overwhelmingly selected as the best software and best hardware for 2023 at STN Expo in Reno, Nevada. Yes, you heard that right. For the first time ever, TransFinder received the Innovation Choice Award for best hardware. And for the second year in a row, TransFinder has won the best software award, adding to numerous past awards TransFinder has won for its software products. TransFinder's move into hardware was driven by client demand. TransFinder now provides the tablet, the mounts, the card reader, and more as part of its one partner, one solution approach. Guys, you can learn more by visiting transfinder.com or calling them at 800-373-3609 or email them at getplus@transfinder.com and make sure you put STN podcast in the subject line. All right, we're back. Ryan, there's been some fun headlines and some not so fun headlines. Let's start with the good news. So Cummins, Daimler, PACCAR joint venture, what is happening there?
Well, yes, they last week, the triumvirate there basically announced a 30%, 30%, 30% jointly controlled joint venture on battery cell manufacturing. So electric vehicles, total investment expected to be in the range of 2 to 3 billion for this 21 gigawatt hour factory. So really big news. I mean, we've seen consolidation, partnerships, acquisitions, these three separate entities, though, coming together, really investing some big time bucks into battery cell technology. We're looking at LFP battery cells. I know solid state is being developed right now. That we're hearing a lot about that. So we're seeing this huge investment, looking to bring down some of that cost and really start pushing that meter in terms of output of electric vehicles. Obviously, partnership including PACCAR and Daimler, a lot of heavy duty trucks, but a lot of buses as well, and a lot of those figure to be school buses. So to kind of put this in context, an analyst provided us some data on what this could mean. So a 21 gigawatt hour facility or a plant, that's a very big number in the context of trucks and buses. A 21 gigawatt hour plant operating at full capacity by 2026, that would provide enough batteries, Tony, for the entire North American market, according to Joseph Walker of Golden Brain Analysts, a division of Interact Analysis, which is a global firm. By 2028, a 21 gigawatt hour plant would amount to around 40% share of all electric buses and medium and heavy duty trucks, assuming that 22% of trucks are electric in that year. So, what the actual share of school buses would be of that 40% remains to be seen. But we know that with EPA Clean School Bus Program that's set to go through 2026, I'd imagine that quite a bit would be school buses. So, really looking to see how this all shakes out. But again, Tony, what really impressed me was three of the larger, international companies really in the heavy duty truck space, heavy investment on battery cell.
Yeah, it kind of, when I saw it, I thought, okay, this is probably a smart move because they're not necessarily going to become reliant on foreign manufacturers, right? Because a lot of the rub for us has always been the batteries are coming from overseas, and there's really nothing being domestically produced in North America. Now, we had recently at STN Expo at the Green Bus Summit, a company called One, Our Next Energy, which spoke on a panel at the Green Bus Summit. And their vision was also to be a North American battery manufacturer in Michigan. So they have some really interesting technology in the commercial and in consumer spaces for batteries. So I know there's a big battery conference that's going on. I was exchanging some emails with them about this announcement, and they said, yeah, it's a really big deal. These big Goliaths are getting into the battery space, and we're seeing a lot more domestic investment in battery. Now, that also might be contributed with federal funding that's going to help subsidize that, right? I mean, it's motivating these companies to drop businesses in, which, hopefully government incentive programs actually spur business. And, if the school bus industry is going to be a direct beneficiary, excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I was going to make that exact point. $2.8 billion pledged by the Biden-Harris administration last fall. So just, not quite a year later, we're seeing, I think, some of this start to come to fruition. And, I think that, like you said, it's really speeding up the manufacturing here domestically because, again, we've seen so much come from China. And we've talked quite a bit on this podcast about how China owns a lot of the natural resources that go into making batteries. We do have some here in the U.S., but the U.S. has been behind, and hence the reason for this big investment. So the government again propping up industry, and we're seeing the first forays of that.
Yeah, it's exciting, Ryan. I know with EV buses and technology, we've seen a lot happening, and we've been getting a lot of coverage in the national media. Obviously, the Today Show, Good Morning America. We've seen a lot more segments specific. Now, that's probably all attributed to school startup, in my opinion, right? We've been taking it on the chin with bad stories. Good to get some good stories in there, too, about what the industry is doing to revolutionize the yellow school bus and really how the consumers or the parents see us as an industry. Because that's really, I always see it hard to explain because most people think it's a yellow bus. It hasn't changed in 50 years. No, it has. And I have to explain that to parents on a one-to-one basis. But, it's not exactly moving the needle there. And I'm sure you're doing the same. But it's just nice to see some positive press. And I know we have some coverage on the stnonline.com website of that interview with Good Morning America and Today. I think it was Today Show. Today Show, I think, right?
It was a Today Show. Yeah.
Yeah. So Today Show and Justina Morrison from IC Bus was on there in that interview, which was great. And I noticed the investigative reporter who was on there also was the same reporter who participated at STN Expo Indianapolis when we did our crash test demonstration. So it was the same reporter. So I thought, okay, well, clearly that's kind of their expert in the news side of things with school transportation, which I thought was really cool, right? We're making connections here at that level, which is great. So always positive stuff, Ryan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Justina was and her team at IC Bus and Navistar were demonstrating how cellular vehicle to everything technology works. A lot of you folks out there in the nation, that will be familiar to you. We've written quite a bit about it over the last couple years. Last year, so 2022 STN Expo Reno, we had a representative from Applied Information, which is basically an AI lab out of Alpharetta, Georgia, in the Atlanta area, come out and talk about C V2X. And we know that Applied Information is working with IC Bus and Audi. They're also working with Bluebird and Audi on a similar project. But essentially what they were showing on the Today Show segment was how school buses can communicate to other motorists, in this case, a motorist in an Audi e-tron vehicle, of an upcoming school bus stop, an active school bus stop. So an alert shows up on the dashboard, alerting the motorist that there is a school bus stop coming up that students are going to be crossing. This is, really geared toward the illegal passing epidemic, right? But it goes beyond that. They also demonstrated that, it can basically see around corners. It can see through trees, which was, something that came up last week. We saw a video from one of those Ring doorbells of a crash where a school bus was T-boned by a transit bus. And apparently because there was a hidden stop sign behind a tree. So, again, it's showing the power of technology. And we know that there's more to CV to X beyond simply telling a motorist when a school bus stop is upcoming. There are a lot of different things that it can interact with, speed zones. But this is really, reliant upon all the vehicles out there having this technology. So we're in the infancy stage. I know that we've also reported that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is working, in parallel with some of this going on and on some potential requirements or vehicle standards where they have automatic emergency braking. We see a lot of that already in vehicles, but to really codify that, add in pedestrian automatic braking, so it detects pedestrians. All of this in concert is just showing us, where technology can take us from a safety standpoint. We know that advanced driver assistance systems are already on a lot of the newer school buses. That plays into this. So it was great to see some of that positive work that's being done by the school bus industry highlighted again, like to your point, Tony, when a lot has really gone wrong, but a lot has gone right. And I'm hearing from districts that are saying, hey, hate to say something, but, we had a really stress-free startup. We need to get more of those stories out there. And that's what we're trying to do with STN. And hopefully the national media can pick up on that as opposed to, crashes. And, of course, seatbelts right now is really big in the news because of that Ohio tragedy a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks for bringing that up. Definitely a lot of great headlines at stnonline.com. Guys, also don't forget to check out our September issue. You should be getting it in the mail real soon. That's our technology issue. If you go to stnonline.com, you click on the magazine tab, you're going to be able to find all the latest issues up there, archived from previous, but the latest and greatest is September. So go check that out. Really some wonderful opportunities to dive into different technology stories about progressive districts that are investing in tech. So a lot happening on that front. But before we get to some more headlines, I want to bring you a message from the Propane Education Research Council. All right, guys, we have a great green tip for you this week, brought to you by the Propane Education Research Council. They want to talk to you about propane. It's energy for everyone. Did you know that school buses fueled by propane can help you reduce emissions in your community while saving you money? Propane school buses have a lower average carbon intensity than electric school buses over their lifetime by more than half, and they emit up to 96% less nitrogen oxide than diesel buses. All of this from fleets with the lowest total cost of ownership. It's no wonder propane is the most widely used alternative fuel in the school bus industry. You guys can learn more at betterourbuses.com. That's betterourbuses.com. All right, we're back. Ryan, please tell me masks are not coming back, my friend. Is that COVID? We're hearing more and more people. Is that really happening? Please tell me no.
Well, in a couple of schools so far, at least as of, the middle of September, we know that COVID is starting to spike again, which is just to be expected. Again, going forward around this time every year, I think just like the flu, we can expect to see COVID and whatever the strain du jour is to rear its ugly head. There was a lot of headlines, some false headlines out there recently. Anthony Fauci, of course, the much maligned Anthony Fauci, the former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He took a lot of criticism over the pandemic. He is, like I mentioned, he's no longer the head of the NIAID I believe is the acronym. He made some comments as some research has come out recently that indicated that wearing masks might not be as beneficial as we were led to believe. He admitted that public community-wide masks are only about 10% effective. And that's for various reasons. A lot of, his detractors really seized upon that, saying, hey, he lied and this was a big conspiracy. Really what they're saying is that because, in a community, you have so many different masks out there, masks not being worn properly. And then again, the folks that aren't wearing masks, that it really, from a community-wide standpoint, it only limits transmission by about 10%. But still, it's highly effective for individual usage, especially when you're using that N95 or that KN95 mask, that high-grade filter. I think we will still see folks wearing masks. I still see a lot of people here in the LA area just wearing masks every day. Whether they're sick or not, who knows? I just think that, as we talked about in the early days of COVID, it's just going to become one of those everyday, apparels that we see certain people wearing. Now, we have seen some individual schools in certain areas and certain hot spots, Alabama, Montana come to mind, where individual schools saw big spikes. Now, you have to remember that the CDC still recommends that masks be worn in schools, especially where there are high rates of prevalence of COVID-19. And they're in those areas that I mentioned. We have not seen, high rates explode nationwide yet anyways, but as we get into fall, we might. Definitely, some of the articles that I'm reading, a lot of school districts are talking about it now, at least in terms of COVID, but in terms of masks, they're saying, no, we don't even want to go there. Again, I think that we just have to recognize that, we're going to see more and more people wearing masks, but hopefully there's no more mandates. I think really, we're not going to see that. I think, the backlash through COVID was so high that no one is eager to run out there and call for any mask mandates. But, just stay vigilant out there. I had a session in Reno this past summer about cleaning, and last year it was all about COVID. Well, we know now that the pandemic is quote unquote officially over. Try to take a different look at it. Just cleaning protocols in general. Regardless of using sprayers and all these chemicals that are too harsh for a school bus and the equipment and the students and the driver, there's just, we need to get back to just better cleaning, more thorough cleaning, sweeping, regularly, training our staff on just keeping the bus clean. I've seen some photos, and we shared some photos at the session in Reno of, those old flip style seats, which a lot of them are still out there. So much debris and crud falls in those things. How often are you telling your staff to fold those seats and see what falls out? I mean, again, I saw some photos over the summer, Tony, that look like a dump. All this stuff fell out, weeks and months and years of debris, and got all swept up into a huge pile in the middle of the bus. So it's just, again, train your drivers on not just going through and doing a quick sweep, but at least once a week, go through and do a deep cleaning of the bus. We don't need to be spraying, all these different things and using bleach. Please don't be using bleach in your bus. But just, talk to your staff and make sure that they're regularly keeping an eye on the cleanliness of their vehicle.
Good advice, Ryan. Sound advice there. So, Ryan, I also saw that there was a study that just came out about automakers collecting too much personal data. What's going on with that? How does that affect school transportation?
Well, it's not about school buses, but I certainly there is tons of data. And what really jumped out at me from this is the study, which is privacy not included, and it's by the Mozilla Foundation. So what they were looking at is, hey, everybody's talking about cars being computers on wheels. Hey, we hear that phrase a lot in the school bus world with all the data and the technology and what we were talking about just a little bit ago, Tony, with so much of this technology in the buses, and it's spitting out all this great information and data and student ridership tracking and turn-by-turn directions, and we've done a lot of sessions, though, and some articles, though, on data privacy, and we know this stuff gets hacked. Well, Mozilla, what the Mozilla Foundation did is they looked at it and said, well, let's look at what 25 auto manufacturers are doing in terms of data collection. And they found, to their horror, that all these companies are collecting just, way more information than you would even imagine. From your phones when you're plugged in, from the different apps you're using, it's finding personal information on your sex life, anyways. Just this crazy stuff that we would hope to God would not be being collected in a school bus. But I think it's a lesson here just to ask questions of your technology providers, find out more about the data that they have and any data that they're collecting. Now, on a school bus, it should be all for business usage. Mozilla Foundation was looking at our personal vehicles, and there's a lot of infotainment out there. But we're starting to see more infotainment on school buses as well. In fact, we have a survey out right now for our November edition that's asking our readers, hey, what's in your cars that you would like to see in a school bus? Maybe it's, you're not going to see it in a school bus, but we thought it'd be interesting to kind of take a look under the hood, if you will, about, what consumers out there, as well as student transporters, what they would like to see, what they think would make their job easier and maybe more fun. So this study jumped out at me. Just, again, talk to your technology providers and have that conversation about, how are they protecting the data? What are they collecting? And how do those two issues perhaps overlap?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Ryan. I mean, I know you were talking with Betsy Helfrich about, the different kind of student privacy things, especially around special needs students and information and stuff like that. So it all kind of dovetails together. And, guys, it's just meant to kind of help you connect the dots to be sure that you can take advantage of some of this great information and stay compliant with your technologies, protect your student information, because guess what? If you're not doing it, you're liable. And that could mean a lawsuit. And you know what they do? They sue everybody. Right. And that's what goes down. And I know it may not affect you personally in transportation, but it definitely affects your school. It definitely affects the optics of how transportation is viewed, because you want to do your job well. You want to do it in the best possible manner you can. And so we're here to help educate you and kind of elevate the conversation. So don't forget about that TSD conference. It is coming up November 15th through the 20th, tsdconference.com. Take advantage of our early bird pricing through October, is it 14th, Ryan? Is that right?
I believe so. That sounds about right.
All right, we'll go with that. So guys, go to the TSD Conference website. Check that out. Take advantage. We'll be sure to give you the best training possible, give you the latest legalese.
October 13th is when the early bird.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to adjust the 13th. That's all right. We'll take the 13th as well. So one day, guys, you got to get on it. Can't sit around on your laurels. Got to go online, register today, get your team there. Come out to Dallas, Frisco, Texas. Really great to have everyone join us. Great community, the special needs community. We do have everyone, obviously, is running regular ed buses too that comes, but it's always nice to have a focused topic for everybody to take advantage of and be sure you get the most out of your conference experience for you and your team. So really excited for that. And Ryan, we got an interview coming up with you and Mr. Ben Springer. Isn't that right?
Dr. Ben Springer, certified national school psychologist, former SPED director at Wasatch County Schools in Utah, and now runs their family education center. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. All right, we're going to dive right into that right after a message from Vera Mobility. I want to bring you a message from our sponsor, Vera Mobility Crossing Guard Solutions. Guys, if you're concerned about safety for your students at school bus stops, are you struggling to force illegal passing incidents? Vera Mobility Crossing Guard Solution can help. Designed specifically for school bus safety, this turnkey solution reduces stop arm running and provides end-to-end support for transportation departments, school officials, and law enforcement. Crossing guard safety programs are violator funded, so there's no upfront cost to your school district or company. Visit veramobility.com/government to customize your school bus safety package today. That's VERRA mobility.com/government. Let's zero in on safety and keep our kids safe.
All right, let's welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Dr. Ben Springer, keynote opening up TSD Conference for us in November. Ben, great to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is fun. That was a very enthusiastic intro. You made me feel very special.
Hey, well, you are very special. So, for some of you who remember the name, you're thinking, why do I know that name? So, anybody that went to our STN Expo Reno back in 2017, Dr. Ben Springer was there, and he was talking a bit about some training that he developed, and he's going to really unpack that for us in Frisco in about 2 months or so. Aspen on the school bus. So Aspen, obviously a great place to ski, but before we get into your background a little bit, real quickly, what does Aspen stand for? Aside from being a great place to ski.
Yeah. Besides the lovely quaking aspens in the Mountain West out here. Aspen is an acronym for what to do in an emergency situation. And so that's a really, so many people when they come to get trainings, they want to know the 3%, right, of what to do the 3% of the time that we have with students, which was crisis, right? The other 97% of the time, they're fine. And we like to just lead out with, well, there's not much you can do in a crisis. It's basically these 5 steps of you have to assess the situation and the danger. And it's, again, when we're talking bus, this is why it's a little bit of a passion of mine. My first ever gig in education was a bus attendant. I was a bus attendant for a magnet school for kids on the autism spectrum. And these routes were just extra long because they pulled from all over the Salt Lake Valley. And I remember being on these bus routes with kids just, some kids being chill, other kids not so chill, really scary moments, if I'm not going to lie, being on the bus. And fast forward, 10 or 15 years when I had an opportunity to start the reach of training people, it was a no-brainer to add something to the bus garages. It was something that when I became a trainer in a school district, I made an effort always to go out to the bus garage, just because I remember those years of being on the bus, and it was like we were ignored. If that's that's kind of how it is when I visit school districts. There's kind of 2 departments that are ignored, and there's only one that's more ignored than special education, and it's transportation. And so you lucky devils listening, if you are in transportation and special education, I know how you feel. You don't get a lot of attention, but that's where this passion came from. And the acronym is just assess the situation, ask for assistance, right? You always got to use your radio to make sure somebody knows what you're going through. And then you just go down these steps, which is you select a course of action. You determine if physical assistance is even necessary. If so, we explain and engage because of the human rights of children. And to keep you safe and the student safe, we neutrally disengage once everybo's safe. And that's the acronym. And really, you could come listen to this podcast and say, okay, great, I got trained. That's the steps. But the reality is that's in the emergency situation. And we don't want to just wait for emergencies to happen. That's not good training. That's not good practice. We want to prevent these things from happening. And so that's what the Aspen training program is. It helps with the other 97% of our time with students when they're not in crisis, how we can prevent it. And I'm straight up. I 100% believe that bus driving and transportation is not only a critical role in how we serve students of all needs, but plays a primary role, honestly, in building connection to communities and getting access. And so I've always taken it serious. And part of it was also because I will never forget those days on the bus, those hot and cold days on the bus.
In Utah. So you're in Utah.
Yeah.
You work for Wasatch County School District. So let's talk a little bit about you. So we peeled back the onion a little bit on the training that you're going to be giving on November 16th at TSD. Let's talk about you now. So we know that you started as an attendant on a school bus. You actually currently are the director of the Family Education Center at Wasatch County School District in Utah, a former special ed director, nationally certified school psychologist. So, wow, that's, you're a smart guy, Ben. Unpack all that for us. How did you become a special ed director? And, what the heck is a family education center?
It's a good question. Well, my parents, I'm the son of two lifelong educators, so I've kind of always gravitated towards the field of education. I was shocked as a young adult entering the workforce when I was asked to come in on December 26th to work. I was like, who does that? Just because it was foreign to me that somebody would work off of the school schedule. So I think that was a big part of it. I just gravitated towards it. After I was a bus attendant, I leaned in a little bit and became a special ed teacher. After that, spending time as a special ed teacher, I was really fascinated with assessment and mental health, school psychologist, behavior specialist. And then honestly, if I'm being frank with everybody, I have 4 daughters, okay? And a school psychologist salary, I accepted an administrative gig to pay for dance. That was pretty much
there you go.
The motivation. And my kids kind of quit dance very quickly after that, and I was stuck in the job for 10 years. So that was that. I made contacts with you guys at STN through our transportation director, our state transportation agency. And, I just don't rub elbows with a lot of people that know or understand or care how important transportation is to student services. And that was always really great to cross paths with you guys and keep this connection flowing. And then, because the trainings got popular, I had to have more of a flexible schedule. And Wasatch here has just been, the school board and the superintendent, they've always been really flexible and supportive of what I'm attempting to do. And I mean, they see it as all part of, education and supporting. And I provide these services for our own district. But because of the flexibility that I needed, I took on this role of the Family Education Center, which we started in, the idea came back in, for those of you that remember in 2018, those Parkland shootings in Florida. Our community had a pretty close scare around that time. And they wanted to organize, hey, what do we do for families and kids that don't have access to mental health services? So part of my job the last few years has been, how do we provide more community-based efforts to reach families that might not be able to afford it? Maybe there's lots of waiting lists. And so I'm kind of like I joke with our local pediatricians in the hospitals and clinics, like I'm the relief pitcher if there's families that are really in need, but there's not space. We try and make sure that as long as they're in our county, in our community, that they can get access to free mental health services. So that's what our Family Ed Center is. It's kind of a mix between outreach, some parenting classes, and intake clinical assessment.
Very cool. That's innovative. I haven't heard of too many operations like that, but certainly, as you said, mental health, especially coming out of COVID, really a light being shown on that.
Yeah.
Additionally, year over year, we're seeing and hearing from our readers and our attendees an increase in the number of students with IEPs that are calling for transportation as a related service. As a certified school psychologist, former special ed director in your role now with Wasatch County, what are you seeing both in Utah at your district, in the state, and then because you're training, right? You're going all over the country. What are you seeing nationally in terms of the number of students that increase that are now falling on transportation to figure out how do we get these kids to school? And by the way, we have this not only spectrum of behaviors on the autism spectrum, but just in general.
Yeah, no, it is. It's been really eye-opening. When I first started out doing trainings, it was all, here in the Mountain West. And I thought it was a Mountain West situation. And then I went the West Coast. I'm like, oh, it's in the West. And then you get the Midwest, like, oh, it's happening here. Now, coast to coast, it's the system's getting overwhelmed. And I mean, I have like kind of if I'm take a bird's eye view of it, a lot of it has to do with from the time of public schools, from like Little House on the Prairie to now, there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to students with disabilities. It's always been, the focus has been literacy, numeracy, maybe some science in there. And I mean, it's no joke. From Little House on the Prairie to 2023, if a kid throws a chair or scratches off eyebrows, there hasn't been a lot of innovative ideas of how to respond to that. And the result of that is, in the past 20 years, with the information age and parents, rightfully so, learning more about their rights to their students with disabilities, it's almost like we're being asked to play catch up. And so what feels like an overwhelming hit to the system, which it kind of is, it's actually just us catching up to what we should have been doing for a very long time. The very first special education laws were written in the 70s, starting to get ratified with the Americans with Disabilities Act in the 80s. And then you have in the late 90s and the early 2000s, the IDEA, which is, the national governing body of what to do in special education. And until the information age, I'm not sure administrators were upfront with, even if I bet they didn't know. I bet there was a lot of time from Little House on the Prairie to, the early 2000s, where a lot of administrators who, remember, were formerly teachers, were formerly classroom teachers, the majority of them. The training sequence in a general education to administrator doesn't give you a lot of details about where this is. So I look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. It's almost like we were missing things for so long that we're now forced to play catch up, because the consumers, the parents of education, of learners, understand more. Mm-hmm. Now that breeds a lot of problems for school districts, obviously, because parents are coming with these demands and school districts aren't equipped with the tools and resources to respond. And then we start seeing this degradation of trust and confidence in between parents, communities, and schools. And so that's my bird's eye, 30,000 view of the situation. Here's the other situation. Kids, since the dawn of time, have been inconvenient. They are not convenient. We forget there's a human aspect to rearing children. And when we're transporting them on a bus or trying to work with them in a classroom or take them on a field trip, they can be pains in the butt. And I say that as a parent. I say that as an educator and a psychologist. Sometimes kids are just being a pain, and we need to A, acknowledge that it's part of the growing process, and B, how do we support everybody that comes in contact with kids about how to be safe? And when as a kid, what we hope our training does, and we hope to provide at the conferences, kind of, I like to call it, we have a whole situation. I was like, when to worry. When is a kid just being a punk? And then when is it a mental health, behavioral, special education crisis? And what we want is everybody on any level, whatever you're doing for the school district, to understand when to worry so you can access the resources that are available.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, it's a great point you make, how, we're relatively, new to this. I mean, going back only, a little over 40 years. If you go back to the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, Public Law 94-142, which was really the precursor to IDEA, or one of them, it definitely, it seems that, there's a lot that has been thrust on school districts. And again, on one hand, you're saying, it's been 40 plus years, but it's only been, to your point, it's only been 40 years. So interesting. I want to get your perspective, being both a former bus attendant or aide or monitor, depending on, what you call it in your part of the world, but also a public school teacher, seeing the similarities and differences of educating students. You have, on one hand, a big, long yellow missile and a driver who most of the time has their back to the students, where, we have this conversation a lot. Never would you go and train a special education teacher and say, okay, you're going to teach this class of 20, 30 kids with your back to them, much less drive 60 of them, right? So you've seen this, being an attendant. What say you when you're out there training, or you're just talking with transporters about how to manage those behaviors? Obviously, an aide or an attendant would be great if it's called, but we're seeing so much that it's only being used or tending to be used. So this goes back over the last couple of decades, actually, if the IEP calls for it. What say you in terms of resources to help manage these behaviors? There's technology, of course, too, cameras. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, my perspective is we have to improve communication between the transportation and the classroom. And you would think that would be an easy thing to do, but it turns out working in these both transportation and the physical building side of things, it's incredibly difficult. And what I would say to all of this is the biggest resource that we hope to provide and train is awareness and avenues to open those lines of communication just for safety. And another resource I would share with, just as I share with classroom teachers, I would share with bus drivers and attendants. It's not all on you to fix it. And shame on us if we ever ask you to do that. Mm-hmm. This is always going to be a team effort. And the more we can de-silo our roles, the better. And I think that's a perspective that at least I get feedback from. I like to think it's what helps. But the feedback I get working with transportation departments and special ed and gen ed is that I've experienced it all. And, that's helpful. And the backgrounds are different, right? When I come to transportation, when I became a bus attendant, there was no idea that this was an area I wanted to go into, or it was just, I was going to college and it was just like, well, this seems like it fits my college schedule. I can do this. And, when you're trying to reach people and train people, it helps to understand why they're in it and what brought them to it. And then connecting them to a different side of professionals, right? Administrators who are usually career educators, connecting them to bus drivers who this might be a part-time thing, this might be a full, we don't know. And then connecting them to educators who are either brand new or lifelong educators. All these different backgrounds, we all look at things a little bit differently. And what is not helpful when it comes to behavior management is approaching things differently. Mm-hmm. And so the number one goal that I have when we created these Aspen modules and Aspen on the Bus is to create a consistent response to behavior across all settings. So playground, cafeteria, classroom, bus, you name it. The more we can all beat to the same drum, the safer we'll be and the better the results.
And now you are, in addition to all the accolades and the career path that we talked about, you are the founder of Totem PD. I believe PD stands for professional development. So this is the vehicle that you're using when you're going out and doing your training, and kind of the background behind Aspen and Aspen on the school bus. You are also an author, and I have to talk about this. There's a couple of titles, especially Autism is a Burrito.
Yeah.
That's one of your keynote addresses.
Yes.
But you have written a couple books. Happy Kids Don't Punch You in the Face: A Guide to Eliminating Aggressive Behavior in School. Now, how the heck did you come up with that title?
Well, it's a ringer. It's who knew, but it's the most truth you'll ever say. Is our work in mental health, as far as I see it, is not to force the kids to fit into our systems, but to help them find, life satisfaction in their world. And once you do that, you see aggression be eliminated. It's when we're trying to force kids into, you sit, you listen, like Pink Floyd, stand up, sit down, another brick in the wall type situation. Mm-hmm. I don't know a human being on the planet that likes to me being told what to do. I mean, think of us as adults. If you're listening to this podcast, if somebody walked up to you and said, "Hey, you can't drive that way," or "Hey, do this," there's a little thing inside all of us that doesn't like to be told what to do. And what you find out after doing this for 20 years is we don't change kids' behavior. They change their behavior. They have to. We are in charge of changing our behavior. And when we do that, you start seeing life satisfaction. These doors open up and adults and kids become less aggressive. So that's the idea. Is there's in the book, there's actual research, science, and steps about how to increase levels of happiness in kids and adults. And you'll get a taste of it at the conference and in the training programs that we provide, because these aren't like little Hallmark messages like, be happy, turn that frown upside down. These are hardcore, 20 years of research that says, hey, look, if we can focus our education and our experience with kids and each other on reaching these really meaningful life satisfaction events, we start becoming less agitated, angry, pissed off, aggressive. And that's the goal. And so that's the gist of the book. And who knew? But I only knew after making tons of mistakes working in schools of trying to force kids to fit into the black and white or the rigid structure of a school setting. And it was only after we kind of failed enough that you have to try something new, and you don't throw out expectations. I never want to make anybody that listens to this, whether you're a parent, an educator, or both, that the answer is to take it easy on kids and just, let them do whatever you want to do, you sweet little spirit. It's not like that. What it is we set really high expectations, but real meaningful ones that transcend school behavior and go on to your future and what's meaningful to you in your life. And once you do that, you can have really high expectations for behavior and help them meet their goals. And then all of a sudden things start unfolding. It takes time. It's not it's not something you get done in a couple hours. But it works. And I'm really, really proud of the success of that book and these training programs, because it came from a lot of failures. So when I share it with people, you're going to hear a lot of times that I screwed up, and I've learned from mistakes, and hopefully I'm giving you so you can avoid all of them that I've made.
Absolutely. And talk about mistakes, parenting. I make about probably a dozen a day with my two kids. But another book that you wrote, GPS Good Parenting Strategies. No one wants to talk about the pandemic, but it's the no guilt survival guide for parenting during the pandemic and beyond. We know, COVID's ramping up again. I think it's going to be, kind of like what we talked about in the early days, the new flu, and it's just kind of like COVID season now. And you talked a lot about mental health. So, really, I need to read some of these books, especially the Good Parenting Strategies. I'm really looking forward to that. Before I let you go, though, I got to hit on this. So talking about behavior, Ben, we're hitting the TSD attendees or prospective attendees with a carrot rather than a stick.
That's right.
So all TSD attendees will receive an free individual subscription to your training course. It's a $595 value. And I guess there's going to be district packages available as well with unlimited subscriptions that could be purchased in Frisco when you're speaking.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. I love coming out to speak, and I'll talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime about behavior and mental health. But I kind of felt a little guilty when I first started doing this, just leaving and saying, "Hey, there's my message. Bye." I'm dead serious about this. When you come to a conference, I want you to leave with resources that extend beyond the conference, regardless of the conference I'm participating in. What I love about what you guys are doing and your area of emphasis is that it's for this really highly neglected department in education. And so any tool or resource I can share and give to those that are invested in coming, it makes me feel a little bit better about my my life and my job. But I'm going to be straight up with you. You need it. We need it. Your drivers need it. Attendants need it. So come to this conference and get the goods, and you get to walk away with something that I hope helps you bridge those two biggest areas, which is awareness and communication, that we can start bridging those gaps in public schools.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Dr. Ben Springer, he's going to be with us at TSD Conference Thursday, November 16th, 8 a.m. to noon. So you're going to start off with a bit of kind of like a keynote kind of warm up, and then you're going to get into the training. Now, of course, I think it probably takes a week to really, take the full training, but you're really going to do a deep dive, or as deep as you can do in about, 3 hours or so on that day. So really looking forward to it. And again, thank you so much for the offer of the free individual subscription. Folks, take advantage of it. Head over to tsdconference.com to register today and learn more about Dr. Ben Springer. Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you, guys. It was fun.
Looking forward to seeing you in November.
We'll see you in Frisco.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Special thanks to Ryan Gray. Appreciate you coming on. Dr. Ben Springer, great conversation. Can't wait to see you in Frisco, Texas, November 15th through the 20th, guys. Be sure and sign up at TSD Conference right around the corner, tsdconference.com. Also appreciate our sponsors today, TransFinder, the Propane Education Research Council, and Vera Mobility. Guys, all the latest headlines, news, everything you need to know in the industry, stnonline.com. Catch up on the latest magazines, that September issue, all the analysis you need to hear, all the wires, things going on. Want to wish you a great start to school. I know we're probably a few weeks in. Hell, you might be a month in, but we want to wish you all the best. Be safe out there, nation. Make sure to listen on this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Nation, we'll see you next week. We love you.